O kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Rachel Froggatt and I am Secretary General of the International Working Group on Women and Sport. And for those Kiwis joining us today, obviously Chief Executive here at Women in Sport Aotearoa in New Zealand as well. I'm really excited about today's guest who I've actually known for several years, and we just had a chat offline, and he was typically understated about the impact that he had on something I was working on, and I'll just quickly explain. So our guest was responsible for content at TVNZ when I was with the New Zealand Paralympic team, and was the first senior executive within the organisation to truly understand the potential our Paralympians had of engaging and capturing the imagination of Kiwis, and was instrumental in bringing the Paralympic Games to free-to-air television. So this is someone that I've really enjoyed working with over the years, and he's obviously moved on to a slightly important role where he is now, and we're really excited to talk to him today. Just before we do that, I also am very pleased to announce that we have our new moderator back, Zoe George, after her spectacular debut last week on her first episode with us with Leadership from Lockdown. So for those of you that have been with us before, you know that we have about 15 minutes worth of questions from our moderator, and then we throw it open to the floor and we ask you to let us know what you're thinking and ask our guest speaker questions as well before we close up with a poll, just to check to see how you guys are travelling at the moment as we emerge from our lockdown. So without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to our wonderful moderator, Zoe George.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Rachel. So today we have Jeff Latch. He's the head of Spark Sport, which entered the New Zealand broadcast market early last year. He has an extensive background in television and digital media across some of the largest businesses in the industry. Over the last little while, Spark has been able to get the rights for the Men's and Women's Rugby World Cups, NBL, hockey, tennis, Premier League, Formula One, and last year they signed a 6-year deal with New Zealand Cricket to broadcast games here on New Zealand soil, including the White Ferns. Fun fact, Jeff's son got stuck in Europe and fortunately was able to make it home just before the borders closed because of COVID-19. He joins us from his base in Auckland. Kia ora, Jeff.
Kia ora, Zoe.
Well,
nice to see you again.
Lovely to see you. Goodness, that's a bit of excitement, isn't it, having your son almost not get home. What's your bubble been like for you, and what's level 2 looking for you and your team?
It's probably been a little bit easier for us than it's probably been for many businesses. You know, first of all, Spark's got very good connectivity, and I think also because we're used to dealing with live sport, a lot of the events come in overnight, and so we're used to working remotely to actually manage sport coming through at very unpopular hours of the day and night. So we had pretty good systems in place, and it's been a reasonably easy transition. That being said, like everyone, I think we're pretty keen to get back into the office and catch up with a lot of our friends and workmates. Yeah,
you're going to be doing a rolling entry into your office like some of the businesses in the media have been doing?
Yes, yeah, we've started over the last couple of weeks. We've been going in 2 or 3 days a week, and I think we'll continue to kind of transition over the next 3 to 4 weeks. And we'll take it from there. But yeah, I think that probably we've all had a bit of a taste for what it's like to work remotely, and there are aspects of it that are quite good. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when we get back into more normality, whether or not we actually have more people working from home than we've had in the past.
You're a broadcaster of live sport, but there has been a lack of live sport during this time in COVID-19, not just here in New Zealand, but around the world. How has that affected your business, and what have you had to do to try and mitigate that?
Well, Zoe, it's been really challenging. So when the live sport stopped in March, we made the decision that we would suspend all payments for our platform. So that means for the last 3 months odd, we haven't had any revenue coming into our business. And like many New Zealand businesses, that's not the best. And we are very much looking forward to a resumption of live sports, so we can kind of get back back to normal.
Yeah, really interesting. We're actually seeing a rise of esports. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something Spark might look into in the future?
Well, we already held some esports rights to a number of competitions around the world. And I think what's been interesting through the lockdown is that a lot of the more mainstream sports have embraced esports as the only way they could generate some form of live content. Yeah, I don't think F1 have done a great job with their esports competition, and we've been playing those events live over the last 2 to 3 months. NBA have done the same thing. And so I think esports has got huge potential. It's growing really rapidly globally. But it's been interesting. When we look at the consumption of sports content on our platform, it's really still been things like the Premier League, New Zealand cricket, when we launched New Zealand cricket content in April, NBA TV, probably partly because of Michael Jordan and The Last Dance. Lots of people have been coming in to have a look at NBA TV, some of the esports, and some of the live horse racing.
Did you see a spike in your subscriptions when you turned it to a free subscription model during COVID?
Only a small one. So what it did, though, is it completely stopped any churn we were experiencing. Because typically, as soon as some of the big sports events on any network stop, then you get people that immediately churn off. And so we found that as soon as we made the platform available at no cost, then we stopped that dead in its tracks. And we did. We had some modest growth. But people like watching live sport. Archive matches can be fantastic and entertaining and good, but I think most people that love sport like to see live sport.
Yeah, there's something exciting about live sport, and live sports starting up again really soon. Spark Sport's a relatively new business, so how has your strategy been impacted by COVID?
Our strategy hasn't changed much really because of COVID. We're still focused on developing the platform, bringing on a wider range of sports content, improving the experience for our customers. And those things really haven't changed. In fact, probably one of the only good things about COVID and lockdown has been that it certainly encouraged those households in New Zealand that didn't have their broadband or streaming sorted out. They really had to make an effort to do so they could work from home. And so probably looking forward, that's going to be a useful thing for us. Yeah, look, our strategy isn't going to change much.
And some tough decisions would have been made during this time. What was some of the hardest decisions that you had to make for, the survival of your business?
I think the biggest decision, and the one we made, within 24 hours, was to make our platform available at no cost, to suspend payments immediately. That was a big decision for any business to obviously make. We made it really quickly. And even more importantly, we implemented it really quickly. So within 48 hours, we had put out all of the communications, contacted all our customers, advised everyone that in actual fact you could come on and it was at no cost. And that's going to still be the case until the end of June.
Oh, till the end of June, because originally it was the end of May, wasn't it? So now it's moving to the end of June.
Yeah, it's to the end of June. So if you're watching this, come on in.
Sounds good. And I know that you've had a real push around cricket content, particularly after you signed that 6-year agreement with New Zealand Cricket last year. And you've got this balance of men and women and content coming from both white ferns and black caps as well. So why was that important to get that balance right?
Look, we've long believed that women's sport in general is a terrific opportunity, not just in New Zealand, but globally. And so from the get-go, we've been very, very keen to secure rights to women's sport events. We've been somewhat constrained because a lot of events are tied up in existing rights contracts, but as they become available, we've actively sought them out. And we're really pleased we've done that. And cricket is one of a number of sports where we've actually secured the rights for women's and men's cricket. And we're really looking forward to bringing that to New Zealand viewers.
Yeah, it's all the international games plus the domestic season, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all the content, all the cricket content that's under the auspices of New Zealand Cricket. So pretty much it's everything that's played in New Zealand with the exception of any ICC run events.
Jeff Latch is our guest. Yeah, there's been lots of conversation around women's sport, particularly as sports bodies cut costs and women's sport might be forgotten. What role do you think broadcasters and media play in promoting this and being key influencers in this space?
Well, I guess there's two or three things that I think are really important. First of all, and this is going to become more so, I think, in the future, partnerships are critical. And they've got to be real partnerships. So partnerships between broadcasters and rights owners, partnerships between broadcasters, and partnerships, I think, with other competing media. I think and sponsors and advertisers, we're all in this together. And if we really want to be successful, and in particular, if we really want to quickly build things back after COVID, then we really need to all work in together.
Collaboration, not competition, right?
Correct. And yeah, I think the way we can help out is with accessibility. We can work to make coverage more accessible, so that goes for women's sport and for men's sport. And I think if you look at what's happened in New Zealand over the last 12 months since we entered the market, there is far more live coverage of sport available in New Zealand now than there was 2 years ago. So we think we've had a positive impact on the market, and we're making more events available to New Zealanders.
Do we need to have a quota of some description regarding the coverage of women in sport and what that looks like?
I don't think so. I've never been a supporter of quotas in content in any format, in any genre. And so I don't think they work. We tried quotas, as you know, with different genre of content in the past in New Zealand, and it really did not have a positive impact. So I think it's more about sitting down, working with the rights holders, making the sport more accessible. And I think there's also a job to be done in promoting sport, and women's sport in particular, and building up and making people more aware of the people that are participating in it. I mean, I think you could probably go to most New Zealanders and they could name pretty much the whole All Black team. But if you ask them to name the Black Ferns, I think they'd struggle, right? And so there's a job to be done, I think, in terms of telling the stories behind the players and what's going on within different sports, which I think all broadcasters have a role to play in that, and it's something that we could all do better.
You talked about those partnerships with broadcasters and sport. Sport is quite heavily reliant on those broadcast partnerships. So what initiatives are you considering with the codes that you're working with?
Well, we're doing a huge amount of work at the moment with New Zealand cricket, because clearly that's a big focus for us. We're not too far away from the new cricket season, which kind of kicks off in October, November. And so we're doing a lot of work with them in cricket to think about how we can make cricket more entertaining, how we can make it more inclusive, how we can make it a more interesting and fun experience for people, and to actually broaden it and make it far more accessible to New Zealanders.
As we move in, post-COVID lockdown now, what's going to be the focus for Spark Sport at this time?
A couple of things, I guess. One, we desperately want to get live sport back on our platform. So pleasingly, it looks like the Premier League are going to get up and running again in late June, which is terrific. And F1 look like they're going to start in early July. We're in conversations with women's tennis, and we hope they will be up and running soon. And also, it looks like we're going to potentially have a resumption of things like the NBA coming up over the not too distant future. So that's our number one focus, is to get live sport going again. And that would be pretty important for us. And then next big thing is probably we're pushing through some developments on our platform to make it better for viewers, new functionality, things to make it easier, the consumer and customer experience to be improved even more. So that's a good thing. And then I think third thing probably is we really have a lot of work to do to be ready to roll for cricket. So cricket's a big focus for us, given it's a big local production, and we're really looking forward to getting our teeth into that.
So while unfortunately, other media organisations are making staff redundant, you will possibly be looking at expanding your team instead.
Well, no, we certainly will be looking to expand our team, and particularly in the production area when we look at cricket. It's cricket production is one of the biggest productions that you can undertake in a local sense, with up to 60 odd people being involved in a live telecast of an international fixture. So, yep, there's lots going on, and hopefully there will be a few roles in there.
And what are you seeing at the moment on the global broadcast landscape? What are your peers doing?
Well, I think at the moment there's a lot of collaboration, probably more than there's been in the past. So I think that's an interesting development. There's also, and COVID is undoubtedly leading to some sort of consolidation in some markets, where, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but some sporting bodies and some broadcasting bodies are really struggling globally at the moment, and that is likely to lead to some degree of consolidation amongst some of the media players in a number of international markets. And it's also looking, there's changes taking place, I think, in a lot of the forward contracts.
We're also looking forward to the Rugby World Cup next year, for which you hold the rights. How's that tracking, and what should we expect from Spark?
Well, it's very exciting is the first thing. So we're very excited about that. We actually pushed World Rugby to include the Rugby World Cup 21, the Women's Rugby World Cup, in our tranche of rights when we secured the 2019 Rugby World Cup. Once again, because we saw this opportunity to really do things with women's sport and to build it and to make it more popular. And when we look ahead to the Women's Rugby World Cup, we'll be doing many of the same things we did with the men's. So we'll be looking to take a fresh approach. We'll be looking to make it entertaining. We'll be, once again, looking to partner. We'll be looking to have a free-to-air partner when we do the Rugby World Cup 21, and to make it as entertaining and as exciting as we can. And it's in New Zealand. I mean, how good is that, right?
Oh,
so
good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
All right, so you watching at home or at work or wherever you are around the world, you can join the conversation by asking some questions. And we're starting to get a few questions in now, which is fantastic. So the first one is, Jeff, how will your business model change as a result of the crisis?
I think at the moment, we don't intend to change our business model. We think it's the right model. We think more and more people are moving to streaming. And as I said earlier, I think ironically, COVID has probably accelerated for people to move into greater connectivity in the home and greater ability to stream from the home or from out and about, which is the great benefit of streaming. You can do it across any device. So we think our business model is the right one, and so very unlikely to change it going forward.
Another one here is, do you think women's sport can become commercially viable? Often it's seen as a cost. What will it take to change that?
Look, I think yes, it can be commercially viable. And I think there's a number of things that need to occur. I think one, as I said earlier, I think broadcasters, media organizations need to make sure that they promote it, and that they also make it more accessible. So they actually provide coverage of a full range of women's sports activities. I think the other thing is, though, that women also need to make sure they watch. If this is done, everyone is very focused on audience sizes, and that actually helps, prime the pump, as it were, in terms of the more viewers that are watching a particular event, then the easier it is to establish and get advertisers involved, to get sponsors involved. It also means that the broadcast rights have a higher value if they're delivering bigger audiences. And so it's also partly beholden on women and men to make sure they watch women's sport when it is made available, because if they don't, then it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So everyone needs to play their part in the ecosystem to actually make sure we go in this upward spiral rather than a downward spiral.
Click, read, share, and also if you can't see it, you can't be it. So it's important to have both female and male athletes and also presenters, who are commentating as well as part of that. Oh, look, here's a very specific question on Formula One. Are you ready, Jeff? Can you get F1 highlights package and not just the full race? Sky has a 30 to 60 minute package, which was superb.
Well, this is a very good question. So I think we're in discussions with F1, and as this person will probably be aware, the coverage that most English-speaking countries in the world get, or the commentary, comes from Sky in the UK. And Sky in the UK do have some good highlights programs. We take all of their pre-match and post-match content that plays out over the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So whether we're able to secure a highlights package or whether we make our own, we're certainly looking to see how we can improve the post-race highlights. So, good question.
Regarding your coverage of your, coming back out of lockdown, what kind of time frame are you looking for your resilience and your recovery in regards to COVID?
Well, I think in terms of our platform, we think our platform's in tremendous shape, so we've continued to invest in it. And as people forget, we've only been going really for just over a year, right? I mean, sometimes I feel like we've been here forever, but in actual fact, we haven't. And so I think we're really confident where our platform is. I think the ongoing job and journey we're on is making sure that everyone knows how to actually make sure their houses are streaming fit, if you like, match fit, to be able to watch live sport via streaming. And we learned a few things about that last year. And there's an education requirement in terms of getting people to understand how to set up in their home. And hopefully everyone knows now that it's not a good idea to suddenly come on 30 minutes before the event you love more than anything, and it's just all going to work perfectly for you if you've never streamed sport before in your life. So that's one of the key things. But we think we're looking good.
How have your demographics changed since you made the platform free, and are there new markets you've discovered that you can monetize?
It looks at the analysis we've done so far shows that pretty much the demographic profile hasn't changed since we made the platform available free. It looks like we may have pulled in some more young people because we've had more esports content, and because NBA TV at the moment is pretty popular, even without live matches, partly off the back of the Michael Jordan in The Last Dance. So there doesn't look like there's been a big change in profile demographically, and therefore other than the esports opportunity, which we're already across, we haven't really seen other necessary glaring opportunities that we missed in the past.
Here's another one. Is it feasible for non-mainstream sports to get broadcast coverage? For example, Olympic sports outside the main Olympic event?
I think it is, and there's a few trends at the moment around the world that are probably going to help that happen over the next 2 to 3 years. So the first is remote production, which for those of you not in the production business means rather than having a truck with a whole lot of people and equipment that has to go to each venue to do a live event, you actually have a central hub, say back in Auckland or Wellington, Christchurch, and you send out smaller trucks just with cameras in, and everything gets sent back to the central hub where it gets produced and then sent out to viewers. That's a really strong trend in production at the moment, which is bringing costs down. And also there's a lot more automated production opportunities for some sports now, which is significantly compressing the cost of covering events. So those two things have been big barriers for getting a wider range of sports coverage covered, but just because of the cost of production. And if the cost can be squeezed significantly, which it can, then it becomes far more feasible to put more sport on air. And also that's where streaming's really good, because you don't have to populate a linear channel. You can just take as much content as you can. And so streaming is also now opening up an absolute opportunity to have a broader range of content. So those trends together are looking pretty positive, I think, for the sort of events that the questioner was asking about.
Rebecca asks, you spoke about Rugby World Cup 2021 being part of wider world rugby rights. Outside of the likes of women's tennis and women's football, World Cup, are you seeing any women's sport media rights being sold on their own, or are they just still an add-on to men's rights? Do you see this changing, and if so, what events?
So it absolutely is changing. So there are more competitions now, women's sport competitions that have been sold on their own, so they're not combined with men's sports rights, and I think that is a trend will continue to grow. And as the women's competitions become bigger, as they become more popular, as there is more expanded coverage of the live events and of the people that are playing them, so people get to know them, and we start to develop a more understanding for the key participants, then that is absolutely where it's going. And so examples of where that's happening now, it's happening in cycling, it's happening in basketball, it's happening in football, it's happening in motorsport. There are more and more women's competitions that are being sold separately from the male equivalent.
Here's another question. How does your approach compare to global broadcasters? Would or do you learn from them, and what do they learn from you?
Well, I think we're at the forefront of streaming broadcasters. And so there's a huge amount of interest internationally in what we're doing, because the fact, for example, that we would be streaming the Rugby World Cup in the way we did, and New Zealand is one of the biggest rugby markets in the world, that had a massive amount of focus globally in terms of us actually doing that with that sort of event. And similarly with some of the other events that we've now run, there's been a lot of interest and appetite to see how that worked for us. And because all of the traditional sports broadcasters are all losing subscribers into streaming, and so they're all having to move into it. Just look at what ESPN are doing. And they're now realizing that the linear pay model, which worked so well for 20 years, has now got some serious challenges, and that they kind of need to move with the times. So when you see people like us come along that are doing a sports-only model, it's only streaming, then there's a lot of interest in it.
More global sports organizations are developing their own channels to market. How does this impact you?
Well, we see that as a real opportunity, right? So it means that the sport is actively embracing streaming. So they get the fact that that's the future. And there's going to come a point where most people, we think, don't actually want to have their own subscription to NBA, NFL, UFC, Premier League. You can go on with all the sports, because most people that love sport like watching 5 to 7 sports. So most people don't want to have 5 or 7 different sporting apps which they have to jump in and out of to watch it. So our view is that we make it more convenient. We actually pull a lot of them together. And it could be that we actually play or make access to some of those D2C services via our own platform to make it easy for people.
What kind of devices are coming to market which might help you in expanding the viewer market?
Well, I think there's a pretty wide range of devices now. Like, I think we're now on 11 different devices. Smart TVs are obviously really important, because most people still enjoy watching big sports events on their big TV set in the home. And so, but having it really easy, so you can just click on your TV and then you're straight into Spark Sport, which the new TVs allow you to do. That makes it really easy for people. And as we get more and more variants on mobile phones and on laptops, iPads, etc., you can get Spark Sport on all of those too. So we think we're covering devices pretty well.
There have been a lot of voices standing up and asking the sports sector to be careful in their decisions now due to long-term impact. What would you like to see sports orgs do?
Well, I think that they do need to, first of all, make sure that it's paramount that they look after the health of the players, coaches, support staff, and indeed the broadcast teams that are bringing the sports coverage to everyone, right? So that's kind of paramount. We don't want to suddenly rush pell-mell back into live sport, and in the process of doing so just cause, another wave of COVID to kind of truck around the world. I mean, that would not be good. And I think in that sense, the biggest challenge facing global sport in the next sort of 12 to 18 months is travel and borders. And that is a big challenge. I mean, we're very fortunate in New Zealand and Australia. It's a no-brainer that we form our little trans-Tasman bubble. That's a terrific idea, and we're lucky in that. But if you go beyond that, it's how do you safely do that? How do you make that happen? I see some significant challenges over the next 12 to 18 months.
Oh, here's a personal question for you, Jeff. Which sport do you watch that excites you the most, and do you wish you were out there playing it?
Well, here's the thing. The one that I actually really enjoyed watching over the last 12 months, and I hadn't watched it for several years, is F1. I've actually got hooked on F1 again. And the only challenge in that, I guess, is I'd love to get in one of those cars, but I suspect they won't let me. So, but I've actually really enjoyed our Formula One coverage. And I enjoyed the support series that actually went out on Netflix. And I've actually got passionate about F1 again. It's just fantastic to watch. And one of the good things about F1 is that even though it's very sad they won't be able to have live audiences present, it's not impacted so heavily as a lot of other sport by not having the live in-stadia audience, just because of the nature of the sport. So, that would be the one. Yep.
There's something quite amazing about the sound that F1 cars make, right? It's amazing. Here's a question from Melissa from Paralympics New Zealand. She asks, what is Spark's position on the future of Paralympic broadcast in New Zealand and the opportunities that exist to grow access to this content for all New Zealanders? Well,
Melissa, lovely to hear from you. I think you know from our previous time working together that I'm passionate about Paralympic sport. And so I would very much like to think there's a role for Spark Sport to play in helping to support, promote and broadcast Paralympic sport going forward, and in conjunction potentially with other parties. So, I just think Paralympic sport in total has made enormous strides over the last 3 to 4 years, and it's behoven on all of us to see if we can keep that momentum going and continue to drive it and grow it, because it's a fantastic sporting event.
We've got time for a couple more questions, so if you've got a question, please put it in. You can ask it now. All right, here's another personal one for you, Jeff. Are you ready? Are you living the dream? Is this the job where you want to live and get paid for doing your passion?
Yes. So, I love this job. There's a wonderful team of people at Spark Sport and a wonderful team of people at Spark. I mean, if you think about what we've all lived through over the last 3 months and the huge amount of work that all of the Spark team, the core big Spark, as I like to call them, is Big Spark and Little Spark, the Big Spark team have done an absolutely wonderful job in enabling all of us to continue to work from home, to support us, to support, I think, the connectivity requirements and needs of people all around the country, and to actually offer relief as and when is required. So, I think I love what I do. I'm very, very fortunate to actually be doing my dream job, and it's very exciting. Has lots of challenges. I mean, who would have thought? No live sport for 3 months. It's never happened in the world. I'll tell you one thing, though, that this is interesting, that and not everyone may realize this. We are up for an absolute logjam of global live sport from September through to December this year, because all of the competitions that were going to play out in the front half of this year, many of them have been pushed back into the back half. And this is global. And so we are going to have more live sport available than I think the world has ever seen in such a focused period of time between December and December. It's going to be a sports lover's dream. So make sure you get on board with Spark Sport so you can enjoy some of it. But there's going to be a mountain of it because of this compression of all the seasons into the back half of the year.
And we're going to see back-to-back huge tournaments as well. We've got the Olympics coming up that have now been postponed, and there's a whole bunch of stuff straight after that. The Rugby World Cup's happening, and it's just going to be full on. It's the sports fans' dream, I think.
Yeah, pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Here's another one. There's a growing expansion of the recreation market as an extension of the sports market. They ask, is there? And where will you start to move into this recreational space?
I guess our focus at the moment is to secure, build and develop an ecosystem of sports content that actually ensures that our business is a strong one and it is one that can go forward and prosper and grow. So that's our focus in the short term. And so that means that our focus is more about live sport coverage and supporting content that feeds into the live sports. But when we look at sports, like if we look at cricket, we're really interested in building verticals within a sport. And so that's when we start to cross into the recreational space and it starts to get really interesting. So, for example, if we look at cricket, and because it's a streaming platform, so we can actually take content and just hold it on the platform, what we want to do and what we're talking to New Zealand Cricket about is, as well as having highlights and matches and interviews with players, what we also are starting to do is build out tips, how to nutritional tips. If you want to play cricket, this is actually what you need to think about. What's the right nutrition to enhance your performance? Here's Kane Williamson perhaps telling you how you should do an on drive and how you should hook the ball. Master classes from some of the best players, and bringing, I guess, more of a background ecosystem of cricket relevant content and making it available, a one-stop shop. If you love cricket, we've got the matches, we've got the highlights, we've got the interviews, but we've also got what I would say starts to sit in that recreational space. So I think that's how we see it. And so that will kind of evolve and develop over time.
Did you see that cat cricket became popular over lockdown? Would you consider that?
Well, I think this is a growth opportunity, and I feel that if it brings in a larger audience, then we should seriously look at it.
Cats and cricket, what could possibly go wrong? All right, what's the process for a national sport that wants to investigate the costs and processes of streaming through Spark? And what do they need to do to have prepared in advance of a conversation with you?
In terms of preparing in advance, they need to pull together just on a one-pager what the sports event or competition is, when it takes place, when are their preferred, event times, is it a short run competition, is it a long run competition, what are the participation rates like, how many people are involved, where does this particular event take place, because obviously from a production standpoint, some venues and places are far easier and more cost effective to cover than others, depending on what the sport is and what the event is. They should pull all of that kind of relevant information, background information together in a one-pager, and then they should reach out to Spark Sport, our website, sparksport.co.nz, and they should reach out to us just in terms of with all that relevant information, so at least then we can have a conversation with them.
Here's another one. People often say, don't waste a crisis. What has Spark Sport learned, and what will be different going forward due to COVID-19? What's the silver lining for you?
Well, I think I've said a couple of times, the silver lining for us has probably been the fact that it's encouraged a whole lot of households in New Zealand to actually get their houses ready, improve the connectivity, get very good broadband into their house, and learn more about streaming because they've had time on their hands and they've wanted to watch content. And so they've actually become far more proficient. So that's been the silver lining for us. I guess the second allied to that has been the fact that we can work very comfortably remotely. We've enhanced our remote capability, and I think that will be useful. So that's a good thing. And then I think the third thing probably is it's really highlighted to us the criticality of partnerships, cross-media partnerships and partnerships with rights holders. I think we already knew that, but this has really shown that if there's ever a time that everyone needs to pull together and work together, it's in crisis. And so I think that's been a good thing.
Do you think there are long-term lessons that sport can take from this, and how can we make sure it doesn't fall over again in a future scenario?
Yeah, I think there are there's probably a number of long-term lessons for us out of what's played out. And that's not necessarily just sport. I think that's a number of these are in general. I mean, we'd probably have to look back and say we were woefully prepared for this in every sector of society, right? So you'd like to think that one of the big learnings out of this is we won't be caught so napping in the future, and we will have things in place and stockpiled and the rest of it. So if we take that into the sports analogy, some of the things that we've learned are it's really important to have a depth of archive content available at your fingertips, should you need it, so that if you lose live, you've got other content you can immediately put on and to keep your customers entertained. I think we've learned that when it comes to non-live sports content, things like esports can be quite attractive, and they're one of the few things that can keep on going. And so, having some base level of esports content on the platform constantly means that you will be better prepared for this sort of eventuality. And then I think all of the individual sports have all learnt the hard way that they actually hadn't prepared very well for this sort of contingency at all. I mean, I think one of the few that actually had taken out insurance against a pandemic was Wimbledon, but I don't think there were very many others that had done that. And so I think you'll find now that every sport in the world will be taking out insurance to protect them from this sort of thing, because the lack of cash in the whole ecosystem of sport because of the stop when live sports stopped has clearly been the fundamental thing that's caused massive challenge for all the sports organizations and broadcasters around the world.
Yes, it's been a very, very interesting time, and it will be great to see, live sport being streamed again. Jeff, it's been lovely chatting with you. We're going to throw over now to Sharon Lloyd from the Business Circle.
Thank you so much, Zoe, and thank you, Jeff. For those of you watching, our poll has come up now in front of you. If you wouldn't mind answering those questions, and then I'll come back to you shortly with the results of those. Jeff, wow, we covered so much today. Thank you so much. It was so fascinating. And Zoe, thank you for your moderation of today's event and going through all the questions. There was, just amazing to see the depth of what we covered. It was much more than I expected, so I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's really clear in the context of the conversation of today that you're obviously such a great champion for women and inclusion and diversity in sport. And I particularly liked your comment about the importance of the spiral in the ecosystem. And Zoe, your comments about that as well. They were really neat and something to think about as well. So I just wanted to thank you both for your time today, and also to thank Rachel and Women in Sport Aotearoa for bringing us all together today. Now excellent. I was having some technical difficulties, but I do have the poll results. They're in front of me now. So brilliant, 60% of us are feeling innovative. 90% believe the government are doing a good job, and most of us think that it'll be 12 months until this pandemic is over. And wonderful, most of you felt that today, that women and girls will be included in your business recovery plans, which is very important. So I'll hand over to you, Jeff, to say goodbye to us and for the last word. But on behalf of the Circle and Sports Connect and Women in Sport Aotearoa, thank you again to both of you.
Sharon, thank you very much. I really enjoyed today's session. I thought there were some great questions in there. And Zoe, thank you very much in terms of the way you managed all of that. Really appreciated that. I thought it was a terrific little session and I really enjoyed it. So thank you for the opportunity. All good. And Rachel, thank you as well.